start back all the way back to age 9 if we're going to do the Inside the Actors Studio version of starting with karting and how you kind of progressed up through there and got a love for this type of sport.
Yeah, well, it's pretty non-typical. Like, you see a lot of drivers start in karts, then make their way through Formula and SCCA and club, and then into pro racing. So that much is pretty typical. How it happened is not at all. So it's pretty interesting. I don't come from a racing family at all. My dad pours concrete and played soccer. He's a fat Italian from St. Louis, and we had in grade school. There was a kid in my 2 or 3 years older than me who was like an international karting sensation. Like there's a picture of him above the podium against Max Verstappen at WKA Daytona, and they gave him a pep rally. And I'm like 6 years old. And I'm like, how the hell do I get a pep rally? This is BS. So I was like, Dad, I love racing. I watched like NASCAR and stuff on TV. My first word was car. I had no idea you could do this when you were like a kid. So I was like, please get me a go-kart, please. And he's like, absolutely not. It's not happening. And then he meets his dad at a party and he's like, my kid will not shut up about this. And kind of gets the ball rolling, and we got a go-kart and ended up being pretty decent at it. Thank God. And, I raced for about 10 years or so in go-karts. You started kind of a 2-cycle class, and I did shifters, I did 4 cycles, I did everything. I was a 3-time state champion, and then moved to the Midwest, competed in the Midwest, and then kind of went to a national series. And then kind of the natural progression happened where it's like, nobody's calling me to tell me, here's your Formula 4 ride. And we didn't really know how it worked. So I kind of stopped racing. I went to college. I played lacrosse at OSU. And that point, I realized I was like, you can kind of do whatever you want with your life. You don't have bills. You don't have kids. You don't have any obligations other than what beer am I drinking this afternoon? So I was like, man, what's the happiest you've ever been? And it was when I was driving around the country with my dad racing go-karts. So I just decided, I don't care what it takes. If other people have done it, I will figure it out. So I would drive to the local track, which crazy enough, I went to school in Oklahoma, and there's a road course racing circuit 30 minutes from the school, which is just wild, just a wild occurrence. So I would go there and I was like, I don't know anybody here. Somebody has to just give me a job or convict me of trespassing. So I went there and they're like, who is this annoying kid for 6 weekends in a row? And they're like, all right, give the annoying kid a job. So then I was a flag man. I was a corner worker. And they're like, okay, you broke college student. At the time I had started a business flipping 240 SX Nissans. With just floating the titles, incredibly illegal. Don't do it. I was 18 and stupid. But I made enough money at the time to buy my dream car, which was a 2013 Boss 302 and the appropriate color, school bus yellow, Parnelli Jones. So that was my car. And I was like, I have this track car. I have no money to take it to the track because I couldn't sell Nissans anymore because I got into trouble. And then they're like, okay, every 3 days that you work, you can drive your car on track. I'm like, we're getting somewhere.
Nice.
So I worked every day. I was doing track days, and they're like, this kid's pretty darn good for some reason. I was like, well, I raced go-karts growing up. It's kind of my background. And the owner of the track at the time ran Spec Racer Fords in the runoffs. They ran in all the SCCA series. And he was kind of showed me how the real world works. He was like, hey, if you got some talent, we have a spot open, you got to kind of try out for it, kind of like a movie moment. So he gave me a free test and kind of a free tryout, and I just blew all of his other drivers out of the water. So he was like, okay, we'll get the kid in the car. So I drove for Scott for a while. I did really well with him. And then from there I moved. I was working a job at the time for this kind of trucking company out of college. And I moved down to Dallas for work and got hooked up with the guys at Crosslink Formula 4 and did some testing in Radical Cup. And all this time I'm sneaking away from my desk trying to learn the business of motorsports and how to get the money to pay for it because I'm still broke and it's a very expensive sport. And I'm like, I have the talent, I just don't have the money. I'm like, money's the easy part. Let's just go figure out how to get people to pay for it. So from then on, I just kind of became like a student of the sport and like, how do I sell racing? How do I make it valuable for my investors? There's so much information on how people have funded racing. I mean, you've got everything from like the sketchiest, which is like the Whittington brothers flying in weed and bringing it in on speedboats. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. And then you've got like the Rossi method, where it's like, I'll give you 50% of my career earnings for the rest of time if you give me $100,000. Yeah. So I kind of landed in the middle. I was able to like use my marketing degree and kind of my just keep networking and building relationships to where I could give investors an equitable return. And I was able to partner with some really awesome charities, which helped me give people tax breaks and also give back to causes that I appreciate. And that's what led me to IMSA. As I got picked up by a Hyundai satellite team. It's called CB Motorsports, and I drove the Veloster in my debut season, which was last year, the 2022 season. And about halfway through, I switched over to the Rockwells at Audi, and been hooked up with them ever since. And we're going to run the last couple of races, hopefully run the last couple of races this year. Might be with them, might be with another Hyundai team. This will be my second year in IMSA now, so it's kind of my journey.
It sounds like, I mean, you had that baseline of karting for several years from a young age, and then you get to college and just put yourself out there in a motorsport place. I mean, like any of these places around the country in the U.S., you got these kind of historic, scrappy road courses that have been there forever. You know, Pit Race in Pittsburgh, Road America, Road Atlanta, VIR comes to mind. I mean, just these kind of gritty, natural track limit type tracks here in this country especially. And you put yourself there and did flag work and just did the work and showed up, and it kind of led. Sounds like that kind of took the progression, just being persistent, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a bunch of talks, and I'm a keynote speaker a lot of times for charities and partners that I have. And one thing that I always say is you have to put yourself in a position for good things to happen to you. So I always thought, I was like, you're not going to get anywhere closer to being a professional race car driver iRacing in your fraternity house. But you will if you show up at a racetrack where there's other professional drivers. So that's what I did.
Damn it.
Rob's disappointed.
You just killed Rob's hopes.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
This is Into the Apex Motorsport Podcast Network.